So October of 1916 opens up with a massive assault here. British artillery, they couldn't even float supplies to all of the units over on, they're out now, to all of the units making the attack and their artillery, but huge, huge amounts. They still didn't break it, and they did barely as many losses as they could do. The French, on the other hand, are still doing well. Getting quite close to Mulhouse here. They pushed in. They've got a problem, though. They're outrunning their supply, and it's very, very difficult. That thing's running low. It's on a rail line, so I can fling supply to it. But it's gotten to a point where, wow, I don't know if I can get the attack in on Mulhouse that I need to make, or on this hex, or whatever, because this hex is very hard to supply. If I move a supply train down here to, no, 3, 4, I'd have to move it here. Here could do it as well, but back here over these rough terrain, it's tough. I'd have to basically shift it right on. Now these are at least on the rail line here. Down here is at least on the rail line. So there's some opportunity to make that attack, but I've got to probably pull a different supply headquarters down because this one is pretty much worn out, and it's just this added complexity. It's easier to rail something in there than to throw supplies and keep the same army designations in place, which I find kind of crappy. Germans desperately trying to patch the weak spots in their line, shifted some troops around here to try to fill this in. Now, they can be pretty certain the English aren't going to attack if there's any defense there. The English really, they're out of supplies, and the Germans know it. And the Germans can't really do anything about it. They could mass a bunch of firepower against a stack that's half the size. They could do that, and they may want to, but it's just, they can't afford the losses right now. They can't afford to recuperate on this front. The British line is so strong. Taking those additional losses may mean next month it falls. And over here, they pulled out of this hex back to Mulhouse. That's the only thing of value down there as far as they're concerned, except that the French can gain the rail line going up around the Vosges, which would be a bad situation. The French are going to have to position themselves, build that rail in. But the onus of the attack's been taken off them. The Germans weren't able to get enough down here to justify holding this extra hex. Even though it's a good defensive hex in the front, it put too much stress on their line as far as I saw. Well, it looks like the pullback was the way to stop this French offensive. It couldn't really advance here. I had to do some repair on some of the units back here, so I couldn't really throw a supply center down here to make the attack, say, on Mulhouse. Plus, it doesn't look that great an attack. It's not a bad one, but I made a bad one instead across here, across this riverline entrenched position. Ended up taking about twice as many casualties as I gave. I'm looking to maybe try to pull my artillery up and start bombarding some of these German forts up here, because if they go, the noses of the German position are actually kind of weak. Maybe not this one. That one's across the border. But there's some forts in there that really are kind of getting in my way, and I want to start knocking them out. Of course, once I do that, that'll call the German artillery back. But the German artillery is a little weakened right now. It's largely along this front and serving some purpose both as a threat and as a defense. And we'll see. Boy, this is getting messy at this point. French were able to get enough of a respite from their channeling activity in terms of the replacement points. And in fact, I think it's probably because I forgot to move one in place that they were able to launch an attack over here on Mulhouse. Not successful. They did 7 casualties to 4, though. Good trade-off. And the Germans are really, really weak right now. Strength point wise, at least over here, they're having a really hard time filling this in. If they weaken this, the attack might fall there. They might be judging that the French are running low on supplies, but they're actually not. The French Second Army, which launched this attack, has 26 supplies sitting on it. It's been sort of those low-scale attacks, and they kind of built up for it. Mainly 2 hexes hitting in any given place. In fact, if they had done a mobile attack first from here and then followed up with a secondary attack, they probably could have Mulhouse, and they'd like that. I've got to keep that idea in mind of that even more intense attack of hitting the first time with a single full strength stack and then the second time with multiple stacks to really be able to leverage my way into things. Because remember, the Germans lose double for territories in Germany, and Mulhouse is in Germany. Plus, it does open up this railroad. The French can convert that and really start to launch a northward attack up the Rhine Valley that would be very, very painful for Germany if it is allowed to happen. Well, the Germans learned their lesson last turn, and they put enough forces down in Mulhouse here. 3 units. Really, maybe too much, but given that they don't have entrenchments there, that's 15 strength points. That's enough to say the French aren't going to be able to get it. Although they do have to only cause half damage, because there's no defensive terrain here, which is kind of painful. There's a 1-point defensive terrain. That's not enough to prevent a retreat. The French, therefore, moved to an artillery assault here. There were too few German divisions here. This is what's really the little divisions are great at, is preventing this. If you have too many hexes attacking, more than the number of divisions garrisoning a fortress, too many hexes of artillery, well, the artillery's doubled, so it was 30 strength points. It did 7 points of damage to the fortifications. They're not gone, but again, he's stripping away both demoralization points as well as just, effective defense strength that was there. It's gone now. Obviously, if the French start pushing into here where all these fortresses are, the Germans get that defense strength back. But just sheer numbers of defense strength points is an important thing to have along the whole line. Right now, though, it feels like the French didn't have a good assault available. So switching to bombardment made sense. It's expensive in terms of supplies, but not if you end up doubling the artillery. And then it's pretty decent, actually. I got to look up about the tanks. I got to make sure that I can't recoup them some other way. There's replacement tank units, and I want to just make sure that I've got this half-strength tank and that I'm not getting replacements for tanks that I haven't been accounting for or whatever. I don't know how they come in, but I was kind of shocked by something like that showing up. I don't remember what the hell it was, but something I was supposed to get didn't show up. Oh, the gas, because it's not in the reinforcement charts. So after the Germans filled in this near Metz, the fortification with some artillery, the French attacked it again, just with an artillery bombardment. That didn't go well. They took 4 losses to the Germans too. They can't afford that kind of trade-off. So again, what we see is, once you get the infantry in place to prevent the doubling, once you get enough artillery in place to be able to cause losses, it becomes a much more painful situation. Now, of course, the French could shift all their artillery over there and probably be able to get an edge, because the Germans can only put 3 there. It doesn't have the benefit that Paris has with the halving, etc. It's not it's not an urban hex. There's only a modifier of -3, which the 4 hexes around it can cancel out. But that's a lot of work to reduce the fortification, when really the overall goal is down here. There's still, and I'm told it's, I'm not going to be able to pronounce it, because I don't see it. It looks like Mulhouse, right? It's like Mulhouse. But without it in front of me, the phonetic spelling, I can't really remember it. And I don't know. There's some degree to which people don't speak the proper word. For example, Frankfurt in English is pronounced that way, but in Germany it is pronounced very, very differently. A very, very different emphasis. And I don't know, there's sort of an expectation that one stay within their own language. I'm not sure if this has that same kind of mispronunciation baked into English. All right. One of those little asides there. But yeah, the French, have devoted enough forces down here to make another serious attempt. Now, can the Germans push more in there and make that, kind of dissuade that? Sure. In doing so, they might end up stripping stuff and open an opportunity up, though. So, almost letting the French hit what's already there and what's solidly there doesn't seem like a terrible idea. This is kind of the problem, is when you do shift to defend against an assault, you end up making that area no longer an attractive place to attack. The French have gained a lot of ground, though, this turn over here in the Vosges. And they also gained a space over here. The German lines tightened up. Ground doesn't matter too much in this game. Losing a city does, though. That would be some 20 demoralization points or whatever, which seems pretty minor compared to the losses in the battle. Speaking of demoralization points, France is getting fairly close. They got another 100 losses or so before they hit, I think, their limit and start producing less. So they've got to kind of worry here. Both supplies and replacements will fall off if they hit their exhaustion levels. Well, that's the end of October. I'm going to load this one up. Been doing some longer ones with 2 months, but it ends up about the same amount of total time. Reduces the total amount of videos, which I kind of like, but it also puts me on an edge where I have to finish up quickly. Got the new entrenchments being built to describe the new line. There was a break over here, if you remember, and then the stuff over here. You'll notice I'm using these little just scrap counters as destruction markers because there simply are not enough damaged terrain markers combined with entrenchment in progress combined with current entrenchments to cover the whole map. And that's just not a big deal as far as I'm concerned. Anybody who's playing this game should probably have already collected up a bunch of scrap counters from somewhere. And if you don't have them, well, you can always use little bits of cardboard or whatever that you can cut out of a box. It's not really a big deal. It's not like you have a lot of different things that have to be represented with fake counters.